Great to be here at the Marketplace Conference. I'm David Thacker. I'm a partner at the venture capital firm Greylock. And today I'm going to be talking with Eddie Vivas, who is the CEO and founder of Curated, which is a company that Greylock backed at the Series B. And they just recently announced the Series C. Curated is a marketplace business, a three-sided marketplace, and really excited to hear what Eddie has to share today about what he's learned from scaling this marketplace. And we're going to take questions towards the end. So if you have questions, feel free to submit them. And then with the last 5 or 10 minutes or so, we should be able to answer some of them. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So Eddie, welcome. And maybe you can start off and just give the audience a quick overview of what Curated is and how the idea came about.
So the idea came about 10 years ago. I was on a annual ski trip that I would do with my friends. I grew up in Florida, which there wasn't a ton of skiing there. And I would go, but I candidly would have a miserable time. I just didn't grow up skiing, was not very good. And I was hanging out with a bunch of people from the Bay Area who were much better than I was. About 3 or 4 years into the trip, I finally was like, all right, I'm going to book 3 days with a ski instructor, try to get a lot better, snowboard instructor. And I met the guy on top of the mountain who watched me snowboard down. We get to the bottom and he's like, I don't know what the hell you're doing. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? He's like, the gear that you're riding is not for you at all. Basically, I had gone into a snowboard shop earlier that year and bought an incredibly expensive setup of carbon fiber boards, some really stiff boots, like whatever looked the most expensive and was the shiniest, I went and bought. And he was just like, this stuff is just not for you. Walk into a rental shop, buy some slightly above the absolute most basic gear, essentially meant for beginners transitioning to intermediates. And I went from absolutely hating these trips, wanting to go spend time with my friends, but candidly, I just sucked, to having a really fun time because I was actually able to enjoy myself. I wasn't miserably scared of falling down the entire time. And this light bulb clicked in my head, which was basically there's all of these people with all this knowledge out there. There needs to be a way to access them. And so fast forward 7 years later, I got this opportunity to work with an incredible team of people that I had worked with at LinkedIn. My last company was acquired by LinkedIn. It was Bright.com. And I was like, well, I've had this crazy idea for a long time. Let's go after it. So sure enough, we launched the platform. The whole concept of Curated is that we connect consumers with experts who help give them unbiased advice. We focused on the outdoors. Our biggest category, ironically, is snowboarding and skiing, winter sports. And we've been operating the platform for about 4 years now.
Great. And so basically Curated is a three-sided marketplace, right? It's you have brands, you have the consumers, and then you have the experts, right? Or the critical third leg of the stool. So, when a lot of people think about the creator economy, they think about YouTube or TikTok, people creating content online to share and to monetize. Curated is a little bit different. And when we've talked about this, you've talked more about Curated as the passion economy, which I think you described as a superset of the creator economy. Can you explain a little bit more about your creators, these experts, and what they do and how you think about them?
Sure. Yeah. So when I think of the creator economy, I think about people monetizing their online presence. So I have an Instagram following, I have a YouTube following, I have a TikTok following. And I basically work with brands or I sell my own merchandise, but I monetize my viewership. The passion economy is about monetizing the things I'm passionate about. So think of it as I'm a hardcore skier, or I'm a tennis instructor, or I'm a musician. You can be very passionate about something and monetize it without having an online following. And so for us specifically, the majority of our experts don't have large online followings. They have super hardcore Instagrams and YouTubes where they create a lot of awesome content, but by and large, most of them are what you would think of as micro influencers. So they have less than 10,000 followers. And most of their business comes from us, customers coming to Curated, looking for advice, and us connecting them to people. Now, one thing that definitely happens is the vast majority of the people that we connect them with also then, if they buy from them, also connect to them offline on these other platforms. But yeah, so we our version, we're definitely much more of a passion economy company. Even though our experts are also creators, they definitely have Instagrams. They create content for us all the time. Like they create YouTube videos for us. They go produce, like we'll have them go do photo shoots for us, and like very easy to get them to this because they love creating this kind of content. But their monetization source comes more from their expertise and their knowledge than it does from their current following.
Got it. And when you started the company, you had just a few experts, and you've scaled it over time to dozens, then hundreds of experts. Now I think you're over 1,000 experts. So I know community has been a big part of the experts. Can you talk about what you've done there to facilitate an expert community?
Yeah. So key to like running a platform like Curated is getting the community stoked and getting the community to really buy in. So I mean, we pre-COVID and now we're resuming it again. We do everything from, we'll host these things called expert summits. We'll bring anywhere from as small as 10 experts to as many as 50 experts together. We'll rent a bunch of Airbnbs and put everyone together. And like, it's a huge hit because when you bring people together that are all into the same thing, like it's just like, there's just like sparks of magic that get kicked off. We use those as opportunities to create content. So we'll do things like we'll tie that in with when all the new gear is coming out for the year, when there'll be like a big conference. So for example, there's the annual conference where all the new snowboards and skis are released. They'll get to go demo them. We'll give them all GoPros and we'll hire videographers. And for them, it's like, I mean, getting access to gear before anybody else can touch it, being able to hang out with people, really, really big deal. But yeah, so we anything we can do to show community, like we run contests all the time. We try to segment our experts by location. So we'll have 50 experts in Bozeman, Montana. We'll have 30 in Colorado, and like we'll try to sponsor, like we'll give them money to go do meetups. Like if they go skiing together, we'll cover beers and burgers afterwards. It's for us. We spend more time thinking about how do we keep our experts very engaged and feeling like part of our community than we do on the consumer side.
Got it. Yeah, and I'm sure for these brands as well, the experts I'm sure love getting access to demo gear, but for the brands, it's great to have them be able to get in touch with a passionate user base of their products. In terms of the expert scaling process, I mean, how do you find these people, right? And how do you recruit them to the platform? How do you train them? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. So, value prop for like get paid to talk about the thing you're passionate about, get paid to talk about golf clubs or mountain bikes or snowboards is silly good, right? Like it almost feels too good to be true. So you get inundated with applications. The main channel for us is like, well, the number one channel for us is of high quality applicants is referrals, and we get a lot of them. But after that, it's actually quite simple. We just post ads on Craigslist, Indeed, you name your typical job sources, like industry forums, industry blogs. The bigger challenge that we have is how do you determine who's a good expert versus a great expert? Because as a consumer, if you're going to talk to a stranger and try to like determine the $2,000 you're going to spend on something, they really need to know their stuff for you to trust them. And so we spent the last few years trying to figure out is like exactly, what are the attributes of an applicant in the interview process? How can we understand it? One of the things that we learned very early on was that we at HQ do not know how to measure expertise nearly as well as our experts do. So one of the unique things that we do is our experts hire other experts. And there's a multi-step process, everything from like a written application with standardized questions to open-ended questions that then are reviewed by three experts to grade you on your recommendation. It's essentially scenarios. And then lastly, there's actually a video interview where we have you like sell to us, explain to us like your favorite technological advancement in the past 5 years in gear. One of the things that we found is like, you could be a hardcore skier, mountain biker, golfer, but that doesn't mean you're going to be a good gearhead. Like some people are like, I've been skiing for the last 30 years. I go times a year, but I haven't upgraded my skis in 7 years. And like, that might be great, but that's not the person to go skiing with, but that's not the person you want giving you advice on your new, your gear. And then as it pertains to training, that's another place we've seen a ton of leverage and value. I think that we early on thought like training feels very offline. Like, why would you do that? How are you going to scale it? We actually saw, so we went from no training to then one-on-one training to then group training, and group training has worked out really well for us. And with the idea of, there's I think 2 reasons behind it. One is the quality of our training goes up a lot because we can do like a 3-hour session with a group of people, right? Versus a bunch of small 30-minute sessions. And the second, probably more important part, is it creates a cohort of people joining at once. And so you're in it together. And so you're like learning from each other. And like knowing that other people are going through this process with you is much more encouraging. So the retention rate of people through this process actually went up. But for us specifically, we vet and manage the experts that we allow onto the platform very closely.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's part of what's made Curated so successful, especially with consumers, because when you think about your 3-sided marketplace, your experts, I mean, they're defining the consumer experience on Curated, right? Those interactions. So can you talk about your philosophy on how you make sure the consumers are getting the best possible experience from these experts?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, key to our first principles is keeping our experts unbiased. So the number one thing you worry about when you go to a platform like Curated would be, can I trust this person's recommendations? I don't know who they are, right? Like, what are their incentives? What are their motives? And so what we do is we give experts the ability to recommend whatever they believe is the best thing for the consumer. And that in itself, it doesn't matter how much we communicate, it still comes up, but it comes clear to the consumer when somebody like myself who went and bought all this really expensive stuff, right? When I first started to like take snowboarding seriously, and the expert goes and tells you like, no, like you shouldn't buy that. You need something that's much cheaper. So they build a lot of trust that way. And then it's also because they're also not compensated differently based on like selling something that we have more margin on or something that needs to go. Our experts are compensated as a percentage of the sale. But what you run into in a lot of these retail dynamics is like they just push whatever they have versus whatever's best for you. And then the other thing this was actually not something that we thought of when we first started the company, but has become a very real driver, is that almost half of expert compensation comes from tips. So that creates another incentive for them to make sure that they're doing right by the consumer. Because when they tell the consumer, hey, you don't need this, like you can spend 30% less and get this instead, often the experts see that come back to them in the form of a tip. And then in fact, they value those tips much more than they actually value their commissions. Because one is, I think it's like talk is cheap. Like people say thank you all the time, but when someone is willing to tip in a context where nobody traditionally really has, right? Like you don't go into a retail store and typically tip somebody. But for us, we have like 90% roughly of our transactions that are expert assisted involve a consumer tipping them.
Yeah, pretty amazing. And I know you've cited in the past that your return rates are incredibly low for the retail industry, like near 0%, which is kind of showing that the consumers are getting the right product from these experts. And I think you also, in terms of keeping the experts unbiased, I know one of the things that you've done is you've allowed, if an expert wants to recommend a product that Curated doesn't have access to, you actually let these experts source it from another third-party e-commerce provider that may have access to it, right, and ship it, which may not be the best thing for your business, but it's certainly the best thing for the expert and the consumer.
Yeah, if you're playing the LTV game, then figuring out what the right thing is for the consumer, like will A, get them to come back in the future, and B, it's key to keeping the experts. The experts are the ones who, if they were forced to recommend something to somebody that wasn't the right thing for them, we would see attrition happen really fast.
Yeah, got it. Let's go into more detail on compensation and pay for these experts. And you mentioned that a heavy part of the conversation is tips from the consumers. But also, what has been your comp and pay philosophy for these creators? Not only to attract the best ones, but to give them the right incentives to do the right thing, but also to help retain them over time.
Sure. Yeah. So the way we think about it is we think experts are on our platform. Everyone's in a different bucket, but it's roughly half because they're passionate about the thing that they're talking about. These are people who would be on Reddit talking about this stuff all the time for free in the past. And then the other half is for the money. That said, we want to make sure that they feel very valued and appreciated for their expertise and their time. So we try to pay them as much as possible. The way we accomplish that is we build as much technology to automate everything other than the expert. So all of the other places that you would traditionally have as a cost center, we've built tech to replace those people. So as much of the economics can go to them. And one of the things that's unique about our platform is that our experts are not, most of them are employed. Most of them are very well educated. This is not your traditional gig platform where people are doing this because they're desperate for work. They just love this stuff. And like the opportunity to talk to people about the things that they love is great. But their expectations on comp are also higher than as a result. And so we try to get them as much as possible. Our retention rates are very, very high. But I think that's come because our philosophy has been pay experts as much as possible, not pay experts as little as possible.
Yeah. And I think what's also interesting about this is, a lot of e-commerce companies over time, a lot of marketplaces have tried to assist customers with AI-driven bots that try to completely automate the customer experience and interaction, or they've put chat into their website or their mobile app to let you talk to some anonymous customer service agent and some back office somewhere. But your experts, if you go to the Curated sites, and would encourage people in the audience to do that, you'll see you put the people front and center. There's pictures of these people. There's very rich profiles that talk about their interests, their experience. And so I think your consumers understand they're talking to a real person who's not just some customer service agent or some AI bot, but someone that's an expert in what they're trying to buy.
If you read our reviews, rarely do they talk about Curated. They talk about Jake. They talk about Michaela, right? They talk about the expert. And to your point about I think chatbots, other than for customer services purposes, I think exactly like when my Lyft doesn't show up, I like to be able to click, get a refund, and I don't want to have to talk to somebody. But the idea that somebody would spend $2,000 talking to a chatbot is just absolutely crazy. And I'm glad that fad has gone away.
Great. So let's go into more detail on the measurement of these experts, right? And you mentioned some of the things you're doing, but experts have a progression in their career, right? They can sort of move up the experience curve within Curated. And so what are you tracking? What's the feedback you're giving to these experts so they can understand their performance and how they should improve? And how have you brought metrics into this equation?
Sure. Yeah. So when we started, one of the things that it took us about a year to really figure out was we get these moments where people would have these incredible experiences, and we'd have a lot of moments where they would have quite poor experiences for a whole set of reasons. One could be it took too long to connect somebody to an expert. We used to be really, really focused on that, or we used to focus on like the length of the conversation. One of the points we were missing was what mattered more than anything was who is the expert we connected you with. The quality of that expert out exceeded everything else, right? Just as for everybody listening, like we don't have 5-minute on-site conversations. These people talk for days, weeks, sometimes months before they make a purchase. They start on the site, they transition to SMS. So these are like really serious. Like if you're a good expert, you'll build these relationships and people will like go back and forth. And that's actually what's required to make this happen. So we built a ranking system that the better you are as an expert, the more money you make and the more leads we're going to give you. And we also made it public within our community to create some competitiveness. These people are all naturally quite competitive. And that created the right dynamics for us where the better experts got more business and the worse experts got less business. And they had an opportunity to work their way back up. And then it would spur conversation in the community, like, especially from the experts who are the best, like, how did you do that? And then they would start to share their practices. And like that actually created the right feedback loops that we required. And then we did, to your point about career progression. So outside of just making more money, we put experts on teams. And once you become an established, trusted person of our community, then we'll make you a team lead and then a team manager. And then there's the opportunity actually recently where we started to hire some of these people as full-time employees at HQ. And so that ends up being this interesting progression where for certain people who, in many cases, they'll be like, there's professors that literally are like, I hate teaching. They just don't like academia, and they will transition over to like wanting to be a team manager so they can become a full-time employee. So thinking through how you create a sense of progression is really important. I think that quality, we underestimated progression. We underestimated, I think we like, very easy to solve for that in like 3 months. But if you're going to have people around for years, how they feel like they're growing is going to within the community is going to be important. Like only part of this is money. The other part of this is like how much responsibility they have, how much trust they have. Do they feel like this is going somewhere?
Yeah. No, I'm sure these experts have a lot of options, right? And what they could be doing with their time. And so the fact that they're choosing to spend it on Curated is a testament to how you're treating them. One of the things as a venture capitalist we love to see in businesses is flywheels, right? We love to see, especially in marketplace businesses, where you get a lot of leverage and compounding growth as the flywheels start to turn in businesses. And not all businesses have them, and they're tough to create. How have you thought about that with Curated? I mean, where do you see the opportunity to create more flywheels and more leverages, either from the experts or the consumers or the brands, or some combination of the interplay between the three?
Yeah. So the easy one for us is it starts with experts refer other experts, they hire other experts. So they're bringing more experts onto the platform. Those experts then can they can sell people products. They do bring their own customers to the platform. So especially if you're like a ski instructor or a tennis instructor, if you're surrounded with a lot of potential customers, like that becomes its own loop into our platform. And then we have a subset of experts that go and create content, right? So they love writing about the stuff they like. They love testing new gear. And so we have called 10% of our experts who are very actively involved in creating content. And so and different experts are good at different things. So some are incredibly good at gauging talent. Some have networks naturally where they can bring people in, and some people are just good content creators. And so we always try to figure out how we can leverage that. It doesn't end up being one, like what you learn is if you try to get everyone to be a content creator, if you try to get everyone to refer, that doesn't actually work because it's not natural for them. If you're an instructor, as an example, or you're in a situation where you're around a lot of those people, that's a very natural loop. If you're naturally good at writing, it's a very natural loop. If you're either not good at it or you don't have access to those things, you're forcing it. And so what we've done a good job of is figuring out where to get you to go deep, and then creating the right incentives internally to get you to do those things.
Great. Okay, well, we have about 5 minutes left, so we're going to take some audience questions now. So let's start with the first question here. If you start to build a platform, what is more important, quality of categories or quantity of categories? So maybe you can tell us how you thought about this, how you started with the categories you're in and how you think about expansion over time. And I also know you've tried some categories that haven't worked and you've had to shut down.
Yeah, I've got some bruises on me to talk about this one. Without a question, quality of categories. We early on tested helping people buy wine, helping people buy engagement rings, helping people book travel. And what ended up happening was, there's a couple of challenges. One is it's the difference between being very good in a category and being okay in a category is the difference between your unit economics making sense and not. It makes your story a hell of a lot easier to tell. When people view us as we're a company that's in the outdoors, it makes it a lot easier to get a brand in the next category we're going into within the outdoors on board, versus like you having to explain why do you sell outdoor gear and diamond rings. And then And third, there's the cross-category dynamic, right? Which is like somebody who's of a specific persona type can actually is more likely to buy. And so if you're great within the outdoors, you could capture all those outdoor sales, at least in our case. So if I had the opportunity to do it again, I would have definitely not launched more categories. We are going to launch into more categories now, but this is after 4 years of just being focused and getting our outdoors categories into a really good section.
Great. Next question is, what kind of contractual agreement do you have with the experts? Are they freelancers, full-timers, part-timers, and how do you do this?
So our experts are contractors. We hire in almost all states, but if there's a question within a state whether or not someone can do remote work and not be classified in a certain way, then we're cautious about hiring experts in those markets. For us, fortunately, because we're qualified under commission-based sales, we're exempt by all the guidelines, but we're just extra careful. We do, when experts achieve if experts want to become an actual like manager of experts, there is a path for them to become full-time. That's something we recently introduced, and it's actually been a pretty big win for us.
Great. Next question, and I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe elaborate a bit. When's a good time to launch into a new category?
So that's a great question. Because we're having that conversation right now. I would say it's a good time to launch into a new category when you feel good about your current categories, right? If you know, hey, there's still a lot of work I need to do, then I think focus is key. That said, I do understand that there is a need to have a certain base set of categories to make it comprehensive enough to not feel weird, right? Like if we only sold snowboards and skis, that feels a bit off. Like we made the decision that as a category, we needed to be in outdoors, not just one category, but we do focus our experts are how much money we spend on marketing, how much money we spend in inventory to the places where we perform better, even within the outdoors. So we're constantly optimizing these things.
Great. And final question, I think we have time for one more. This is a question, I know we've discussed it, Eddie. It's how do you generate recurring requests or repeat visitors or repeat consumer behavior from your customers, right? Getting them purchase more frequently with Curated.
Sure. So for us, we have this unique dynamic where our experts are building these relationships with the customers, where sure they're helping them with buy the skis, but then they're asking the customer afterwards, hey, like send me a photo, right? And like up on the mountain, they're sending a photo of them with their kids skiing, and they actually build these relationships. And so if a relationship is sparked, it becomes very natural just to text the person and be like, hey, I also need this now. What's key is to transition from this being like transactional advice to a relationship. What makes it easy isn't that you don't actually need to be a good salesperson. You just need to be genuinely passionate about what it is that you're talking about, and then the other person will want to engage with you. So for us, the big distinction we see is like, if people continue to chat back and forth post-sale, the chances of repeat are much higher. And it makes intuitive sense. It's one of those things where you have to remind the experts people actually want to hear from them, right? Because they don't want to be annoying, right? They don't want to feel like a sleazy. They don't view themselves as salespeople. They view themselves as experts. But that's key to repeat.
Yeah, and so much of the e-commerce world, the marketplace world, is transactional behavior, right? Where and Curated's really trying to build these relationships. Well, I think that concludes our time for today. Eddie, thank you very much. Congrats.
Appreciate it. This is fun.
Curated and your recent Series C announcement, really exciting. And for those on the audience, feel free to check out. Since you're not going to plug the company, I will plug from the shopper behavior. It is Q4, so if you're interested in some gifts, feel free to check out Curated, all kinds of outdoor stuff, and experience the magic of experts yourself. So thank you all, and we'll drop off now.